There's something about me that not too many people would be able to guess, and that is, I am an absolute Sonic fan. I mean it, from the games, which admittedly range big time in terms of quality, but definitely helped define my upbringing, to the shows that I genuinely get a varying kick out of almost all of them, except Sonic X is just bad, to the comics even when they get batshit insane. Fuck contenders though. All my homies hate contenders. But anyway, I'm a total fanatic even to the point I started getting into fan games. Just waiting on the next official Sonic game to come out. Hopefully it's actually good. Don't worry, I don't just blindly give my money to Sega just because they put out a Sonic product. I ain't that much of a shill. But that just speaks to how much I enjoy the blue blur. I grew up playing the games and watching the shows that it'd be impossible for me not to be a fan to this day. That's why the idea of a Sonic movie had me so hyped. To finally see one of my all-time favorite characters on the big screen, of course I was down. But I can't admit my hype fell when I saw that it was gonna be a live-action CGI hybrid.
You raised my hopes and dashed them quite expertly, sir. Bravo!
Now, I still believe in giving the benefit of the doubt, so I was still on board, at least until the trailer dropped. Then the trailer dropped. That dirty dish rag they tried to call Sonic was presented to me, and that was enough for me to say, well, you have officially lost my money. But thankfully the fan outcry was strong enough to get them to say, okay, we were wrong, and they fixed it by getting Tyson Hess on board. So now Sonic looked more close to what Sonic should look like. And then we finally got to see the movie with the better model. And I honestly mean it, it was fun. Yeah, I wished it was a fully animated Sonic movie, but for what we got, there was a feeling of care that came across from the people that worked on it, and it did get me on board for this movie franchise and excited to see what happens next. Now, I'm not one to say everyone should absolutely love this film. I'll admit it is flawed in some ways, but I couldn't help but see a few criticisms rallied against it. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, but a few of these are kinda out of line, I'ma be real, so I think it's only necessary to properly dismantle a few of these, let's be honest, nitpicks.
Pop culture references.
Okay.
Okay, let's tackle this part first since it's the most abused criticism when it comes to films in general. Listen, people need to stop adopting Doug Walker's very dated way of thinking, especially when he barely follows his own rules himself, but that's a topic for another time. When it comes to film, there's nothing really that wrong with pop references. Sure, they can be a bit distracting at times and sometimes date the film depending on the reference you use, but they aren't inherently bad. It really is not that bad for this movie considering who this movie is about. Sonic the fucking Hedgehog, the 90s mascot with a too cool for school attitude. Even his own games have a bunch of references, lest we forget the Death Egg in the old games, or even Super Sonic, which was just Super Saiyan from DBZ. I know some people argue, but it's distracting from the movie. I'm a guy with ADHD, and it's not that hard to pay attention after a reference is made. If you find yourself losing attention because of a 1-second reference or even a few, then you probably shouldn't be engaging in entertainment. I'm gonna level with you. It shouldn't be hard to get into a movie because a reference was made. And someone might throw this at me, what about the Keanu line? This was when he saw Tom and Maddie watching Speed, which came out in the 90s. Guess what era Sonic's from? Exactly. Plus, it makes sense for Sonic's character here since he has old comic books and looks through people's windows as his only culture to pull from on Earth. Really, it's just a dumbass, very outdated way of criticizing any type of movie. This movie takes place in the 2020s, so it's fine if it's like, oh, this character referenced something that is actually a part of our culture that we like to talk about on a regular basis. It's really just kind of asinine. Moving on.
Product placements.
Now this one's sort of in the same boat as the references. People hate products being all over the place in movies, but honestly, it's happened so often that you tend just to not care. Sure, snobs would say you should care, but fuck them. Who cares if they think it's distracting? I see this stuff and I think, yeah, if this takes place on Earth, that makes sense for us to see that stuff. It'd be kinda weird if we didn't. Now, sure, in some cases, it's not done well, to which this movie can be guilty too. Like for instance, the Olive Garden stuff. It's just a slogan and pointing out what it's selling. There's really nothing that special to it.
The only apps on my phone are the ones that came with it.
In the Olive Garden.
Because when you're there,
Your family.
What an odd thing to say.
That, I'll admit, is more distracting in that no human being does that, like, at all. it really does come across as forced. But again, it's not really that distracting since it's only for like a few seconds. The other product placements like Zillow make sense in context of the film since Tom and Maddie are literally moving and looking for apartments. Why wouldn't they be using one of those apartment websites? Seriously, it's just one of those cases of if they're using the product how it's supposed to be used, fine, whatever. Like, oh, we get a shot of the Zillow website. Is that really that bad of advertising? Like, I'd expect them to be looking on some type of apartment website. Like, whatever. So you see it. Who cares? Really, it all just falls in line to just nitpicks more than anything.
Sonic is too childish.
Okay, time to actually get into the meat and potatoes of the criticisms. This I honestly don't get because it's done pretty well with this story. I know we all want that Sonic where he's cool and a nice guy and is super confident, but let's remember that Sonic is one of the most flexible characters when it comes to his personality. Sometimes he's too cool for school, other times he's a super sarcastic and a bit cynical guy. He tends to vary based on who's writing him. Here it makes sense for Sonic to act more akin to a kid. He's been all alone for most of his life and didn't have any parents around, so why wouldn't he act like this? And honestly, I think this is a unique side to see from Sonic. We don't often get moments where he gets to be vulnerable. The moment at the baseball field was a genuinely heartfelt moment, and that's something I felt Sonic kinda needed. Hell, we can't forget how Sega has mandates indicating Sonic's not allowed to cry. But this movie went past those and gave us one of the most genuine Sonic movies we've never really got. It's one of the things that gets you interested in seeing if they build on it for the sequel. So it's definitely one of those criticisms that comes across as pretty unfair to the movie. I know purists want to have their perfect Sonic portrayal, but just understand there kinda isn't one. The comics have a good portrayal, mainly due to Ian Flynn and many of the other people writing him, but that is a portrayal made for that particular media. There's a reason you don't see that version in the games. Movie Sonic definitely works for this story, and he honestly works well with the human characters. Speaking of which,
It's live action and has humans.
look, I know we all want a fully animated Sonic movie. I very much am holding out for that one day as well. But I gotta be real, it probably wouldn't have done that well if it was fully animated. Now before you draw your guns, hear me out. We've had animated movies based off of properties before that didn't do pretty well. We all know Powerpuff Girls the movie, Teacher's Pet the movie, Wild Thornberrys, and much more. Hell, Batman got a fully animated movie and even that failed at the box office, and it was a way more popular property. Now, some of you might throw stuff at me like the SpongeBob movies, which did do good, but that was a global phenomenon that a lot of people still enjoyed. Sonic, and we have to be able to admit this to ourselves, is still fairly niche. Yeah, the fan base is strong, but not strong enough to guarantee giving a fully animated movie a great box office turnout. You gotta remember, mainstream audiences just don't turn out for new animated movies like we wish they would unless you're Disney or Pixar, which, to be fair, is still Disney. Now, you might say, what about Illumination? Yeah, they got it good with the first Despicable Me movie, and every movie after has basically been something that's fairly similar in tone and humor. So of course audiences would flock to those movies. But for Sonic, this movie had to work more as a foundation. It needed to show at the very least that Sonic can work in movie form. You may point to the comics and just say they should have just adapted those, but let's be real, that wouldn't help since 1, the Archie run had to die, blame Ken Penders, and 2, the IDW run is still a bit fresh coming from a place of continuity from the games with a bunch of characters that would have made it way too overwhelming for the uninitiated. Let us remember, the first game started with just Sonic and Eggman. It wasn't even the best game, but it laid a good foundation to build off of, which is what any franchise starter has to do. Look at the MCU with Iron Man 1, Lord of the Rings with Fellowship of the Ring in terms of movies, the first Toy Story movie, or even Star Wars with A New Hope. They aren't considered the best out of their selection of films, but you can't deny they are important in getting people on board the idea. And that's what the movie does, possibly here. It gives just enough for the crew to build from and possibly do something unique for the sequels. We get a glimpse of the Echidna clans, which they possibly will build off of. There's a good chemistry between Sonic and Tom that I honestly would like to see fleshed out more. Tom comes across as an actual human versus the other live action CGI fodder that has people acting more like cartoon characters even though they're real people. Can't help but feel like that was the crew wanted to make it up to James Marsden for Hop, even though they didn't make that movie.
See?
But anyway, it's possible that the next movie will move away from Earth and back towards Sonic's world, which I'll admit is far more interesting to see. I mainly say that with reports of the next movie being filmed in Hawaii. This movie kinda had to be made this way, otherwise you just wouldn't have a movie at all. I can admit it's not my definitive Sonic movie, but I think it's fun if you just sit back and don't overthink it, and can lead to a good franchise depending on what the crew of the sequels plans on doing. There could be potential in this possibly, but we ultimately don't know until the next movie comes out. I get fears of this franchise being ass with stuff in our history being pretty weak on the start and having a weak follow-up, but this at least has the semblance of care shown through it.
It didn't deserve support just because the company listened to our demands.
Okay, this is the last criticism, and it's genuinely one I wanted to address personally. Now, I don't believe 100% you should have gone to see this movie just for the redesign. I mean, it was revealed that the head executives were money-grubbing lame asses by not allowing the designers to fix the design before they revealed that butt-ugly Brillo pad they called Sonic. But I do believe if you were some of the ones complaining about the design before the fix, there's a bit of an obligation to at least see the film in theaters since they listened. I mean, we've had cases where the studio listened to the audience and the audience didn't bother to support the movie. Look at Smurfs. There were 2 live action movies that fans complained about for being live action, and then the studio listened to them and made it fully animated, and people still didn't really turn out for it. It bombed domestically, which basically told the studio not to bother with that franchise anymore. So for the studio to fix the problem with Sonic, especially for the first outing, they were owed a bit of a benefit of the doubt. Now, I'm not saying they earned your praise and worship right off the bat. If you still felt like it wasn't that good a movie, that's perfectly fine. Not every movie is made for everyone. I'm not making this video to tell everyone they need to absolutely love this movie or that it's free from any and all criticisms. Far from it. I can see some of the flaws and some of the gripes this movie has against it. It could have used more action scenes with Sonic doing more tricks, especially when he was running around the world. Humor can be hit or miss depending on your taste. We could have spent more time in Sonic's world versus being there for 5 seconds and going to the boring human world. The whole Tom being labeled a terrorist plot point was useless and didn't amount to anything. It's not a perfect film by any means, but I don't think some of the criticisms were fair against it. It is a fun movie with good moments that I have wanted to see from the Sonic franchise for a long time. I've wanted to see a vulnerable Sonic. I've wanted to see Sonic bond with someone proper outside of the stuff in the comics. I've wanted to see Sonic have a semblance of development to his character, and I very much wanted to see Sonic on the big screen. I don't think the humans are really bad, like, at all. Jim Carrey's interpretation of Eggman is fun and kind of plays into the idea of an unhinged scientist. Tom is pretty relatable with how he reacts to the situation, more like an actual person versus the humans and other live-action CGI fodder. This movie was something I don't feel should be judged on what we wanted, honestly. No movie should be judged like that. Any piece of media should be looked at more from the perspective of what the crew was trying to accomplish more than anything. Never from the perspective that people wanted to sell you a bad product. No one, particularly the crews of any piece of media, wants to give you a bad product, and it's unfair to treat anything like that. I hope I was at least able to get some people to look at this movie a bit differently, because I don't believe it was made purely out of greed, save for the higher up executives' reasons. It has a genuine care that I feel shines through and I think shouldn't be overlooked. But that's just a thought.